machlokes v'metzias. I hear a yes and a no. I'll tell you in one sentence. Huh? Today's the Rebbe's wedding anniversary. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
So you talked about it all morning. Am I wrong or right?
No.
You just had a program. What happened to the program? What?
The Minhagim of the wedding.
Oh. Actually learned something, huh? That's not a min Chabad. You tell stories and dance. I want to tell you something. Every year I see this, but today it hit me. I FABRENGEN last night till 2 o'clock in the morning. Which means that I'm very irritable. Okay, I'm just warning you, I'm especially crazy today, so beware or enjoy yourself, whichever works for you. When he spins out, you either hate it or love it. Young lady, there's a seat right here, take it. It's the punishment for coming late. I taught high school 1 year in Besifka, many, many years ago, and the girls came in, sat in the back. If you came in late, you never had to sit in the front. That's the cost. Coming late and sitting near the teacher. God forbid. You think? You're a great flatterer, okay? Just do that to your husband. Do that to your husband for the duration of your life. You'll have a great marriage. Okay? Remember, it's going to get hard. It's going to get hard. It's going to be good for the first couple of weeks. Okay. Anyway, so I said this morning, I came to the shul with a lot of people in FABRENGEN, and I looked at the WhatsApp. So there's a chaverman who sends around stuff from the Rebbe, and it's a group just dedicated to minus from the Rebbe. So Tavshel Lametes, the Rebbe's 50th wedding anniversary. The Rebbe then himself FABRENGEN, which was unusual, and the Rebbe said the Maimer l'chodoidi, the Chasen and Maimer, not l'chodoidi. No, he was Magir de l'chodoidi. The chodoidi, the Rebbe said, in the summer of Yudalit. The Maimer l'chodoidi, our Rebbe said by the wedding anniversary of the Friedrich Rebbe in 1954. That week, 2 very important people got married. A Yid named Yael Khan and a Yid named Label Groner. They got married the same week. The Shabbos before their Chasana, the Rebbe FABRENGEN, and he said the Maimer l'chodoidi. And then when they got married, so by their chuppah, they repeated the Rebbe's Maimer with the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. 25 years later, on the Rebbe's 50th anniversary, the Rebbe edited the l'chodoidi, Lamed Tes. So there was a FABRENGEN in 770, and he writes that Rabbi Yael, Rabbi Shalom Arazov taught the Maimer, and Rabbi Mentlik Mentlik was at the Rebbe's wedding, repeated stories. And he writes how they had a big FABRENGEN, they served fish, and they served flesh, it was a big meal, a big FABRENGEN. So the whole letter, so the Rebbe responds, so you're describing all the wonderful things that you did, but the only thing that's written by a chasane is meraktim and medav tanzen, and I don't see any place that you danced. So the Rebbe apparently likes, you get the FABRENGEN was sitting, someone's supposed to talk and it was to fall asleep or eat food. But apparently, as far as the Rebbe is concerned by FABRENGEN, darf man tanzen. Last night in yeshiva, I came to yeshiva to teach one group of bacharim, and the other group of bacharim were making noise and dancing, and I was very disturbed, but as the Rebbe says, Yudal Kislev darf man tanzen. Okay, we should always dance, but Yudal Kislev, it's a mitzvah. So, what am I going to talk about? Talk about the Rebbe's wedding. To me, the thing that's beautiful about the Rebbe's wedding. What's the Rebbe? A human being. You know, a Rebbe is a person. You know, that's the thing. A Rebbe is a person. You never met that person. But if you would meet that person, he only has 2 eyes, he only has 10 fingers, he's not particularly tall, he's not 6'8", he's 5'10", 5'11", by the time I knew the Rebbe, he was a little bent over. But it's a lakus, you know, it means a lakus. He's not a person who's close to God. He's a person who's an expression of God. That's I told you in class. A lakus, dvekus, the Rebbe is an expression of God. And he's a person. He eats and he sleeps and he cries and he loves and he struggles and he suffers and he fights and he screams and he protests and he gives dollars. And when you're around the Rebbe, you have to remember that this human being who just acts like everybody else, every word out of his mouth, like the Abish is speaking, mamish. And it's very hard to be around such a person and never to forget where you are. It's very intense to be able to remember Rumish state. So when the Rebbe, Bechal Rebbe, everything about the Rebbe is on another level. But to me, the part of the wedding which sort of gets me is best represented by the following story. I told it last night, I'll read it now to you. It's a simple story. It's not even a story of the wedding, but it explains to you how the Rebbe looks at his wedding. The Rebbe lived in Paris. And the Rebbe knew people. The Rebbe lived in Paris. The Rebbe knew people, the acquaintances. B'chal the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were always very to themselves. They didn't do a lot of talking. There's actually a letter for the Friedrich Rebbe written to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin with these exact words. Wie viel der Schier schweigen? How long are you going to be quiet? Von Eier schweigen. The Rebbe is writing to his daughter and to his son-in-law. Von Eier schweigen geht Gott nicht unterwegs. Your quiet helps nobody. It's time for you to open your mouth and start to talk to people. The Friedrich Rebbe writes to the Rebbe. Wie viel der Schier schweigen? And the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, she was the Friedrich Rebbe's daughter. But she had the Rebbe's character. She didn't have her father's character. They would push it. They didn't talk. They had nothing to say. Was machst du? Baruch Hashem. What's going on? Baruch Hashem. Anything else? Baruch Hashem. Sei gesund. They just had nothing to say. They were very farziach. They were very, very private people. And it's not just they were private people. You know, when the barrel is full, nothing comes out. When inside it's so full, it's just, that's what a pnimi is. It's not that he doesn't talk. He really doesn't have anything to say. Anyway, but they had acquaintances. People knew them. And there were people who lived in Paris, especially Lubavitchers, who went out of their way to befriend them, but not to take advantage and push to help them. There were people in France who were Lubavitcher Chassidim who saw it as part of their schus to help the Rebbe. There was a Yid, a businessman, name was Heber, Leibish Heber. He lived later in Pittsburgh here in America. He had children here in America. That he had a business. And he had a car. The car in the 1930s was a Yakara Matthias. And the Rebbe, anytime the Rebbe needed to go any place, he would close his business and pick the Rebbe up and take where he needed to go. He was older than the Rebbe Mistama, but he knew that this is. So he did this as a chassidus. The Rebbe needs help. My business can go who knows where. I got help. That he would stop his business. And the Rebbe was not a Rebbe; he was a Eidim. So one of the people that the Rebbe knew in Paris was a Jew by the name of Mr. Bezbaratka. Mr. Bezbaratka was a businessman. He was a modern. He was from. He was an Orthodox Jew, but he was very modern, without the very, and he was an intellectual. He was a scientist. Although his business was business, he was a scientist. He made some inventions when it came to glass. He had some patents. Anyway, in Paris in the 1930s, there was a Jewish club for intellectuals, Jewish intellectuals, and they would meet once a month, and they would all take chances making a speech on a topic. But if your turn came to speak on a topic, you had to give people references before so they could prepare. And then you would come and you'd present your case, and then they would argue about it, talk about it. So he says, Mr. Mizbaratke, he and the Rebbe were the only two people in that group who were Shemesh Shabbos, were from. And he described that the Rebbe's turn came to say a speech in science. So the Rebbe gave notes, like any other person, good notes from good sources in science for what he was going to say. And at the top he wrote the English date, March 14th, but he wrote 5,697 from creation of tzalachas. That Rebbe knew exactly that he was irritating them. It was a jab. He could have left it empty. He didn't write anything. He didn't have to write 1937. He could have left it blank, but he wrote 5,697. So the Rebbe walked into the room to give his speech. They didn't let him talk. He said, "Excuse me, before we let you speak, you write like a religious fanatic. This is a group of intellectual scientists. We deal with facts, not with philosophy. How do you write 5,000? So the whole time that the Rebbe was allowed to talk about his subject, he was defending that the earth is young. Which is exactly how the Rebbe planned it, you understand? Anyway, when the Rebbe finished, this Mr. Bezbaratka was a witness. It's unfortunate that he doesn't remember what the Rebbe said. The entire room got up and gave the Rebbe a standing ovation. These were not from Jews, but they said, this guy can defend his position. He says to you, the earth, the globe in which we walk, is not millions of years old. It's certainly not billions of years old. It's 5,600. And a group of scientists argued with the Rebbe argued back. And they had to say, as they say in Russian, maladets. He did good. That's a true story. Anyway, but this is not the story I wanted to tell you. This Bezbaratka had no idea who the Rebbe was. He had no idea. Mr. Schneerson. He called him Mr. Schneerson. Monsieur Schneerson. And they were involved. They would meet and they would talk. A story which is worth telling is this. He once went to the apartment of the Rebbe, and the Rebbetzin, he wanted to speak to the Rebbe. So he knocked on the door, and the Rebbetzin opened the door, and he said to the Rebbetzin, is Mr. Schneerson home? And she said, no. Can I come into the apartment? And she said to him, it's a Shaila of Yichud. The Rebbetzin said she went in the hall, and she waited in the hall until the Rebbe came. When was the last time a lady said to a man that you know it's a Shaila of Yichud? It's a story with the Rebbetzin, Chaya Mushka. She said, the Rebbe would not let him into the apartment. She went outside and stood in the hall because he can't come in because Shav Yichud. Just a story for everybody to hear and everybody to know. It's a great story. And he tells the story, Bez Barak himself tells the story. But the story that I wanted to tell you is the following. That the Rebbe came to his business. He had a business. He made glass. And he was in the back in a special office talking to his mother. And the secretary comes in and says, Mr. Schneers is here. So he says to his mother, I normally would not interrupt, but this is a special guy. I got to go speak to him. And she says, wait a minute. Mr. Schneerson, do you know what Schneerson means? He says, no. So she tells him, what kind of person is he? So he described the Rebbe. The Rebbe is very intelligent, very dignified, very soft-spoken, but with very strong opinions. Sehr starke ideas. The Rebbe had strong opinions, and he shared them. The Rebbe didn't hide. In college, if you said there wasn't a God, the Rebbe said there was, and he argued. And people, and about politics, about the world events, the Rebbe had strong opinions, and he shared them. He was very soft-spoken, didn't scream and shout, but the Rebbe, in university, he argued with the students. He told them what he thought, and he would try to convince them to agree with him, like Avraham Avinu. So he says this to his mother. She says, don't you realize this is the mishpach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And he had known the Rebbe for several years and no idea who he was. So he walks out, and he meets the Rebbe, and he says, do you have a connection to the Lubavitcher Rebbe? So the Rebbe smiles, and this is the Rebbe's answer. Musye is sein Tochter. Musye is his daughter. He didn't say, I'm his son-in-law. He said, Musye is sein Tochter. The reason it's such a beautiful story, in my opinion, is because from our Rebbe's point of view, the greatest thing that happened to him in his life was that he married Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter. Why? Because it brought him close to the Rebbe. It was a hiskashus issue. In the Rebbe's mind, what could be better than marrying the daughter of the Rebbe? What could be better than marrying the Rebbe's daughter? The Rebbe took me for a son-in-law. If I marry the Rebbe's daughter, I become the Rebbe's son, parenthesis, in-law, and the parenthesis. There's actually a letter where the Rebbe writes about himself. A son-in-law is like a son. He's married to Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter. So to the Rebbe, his yichus was not that he was Tzemach Tzedek Saneinikul. His yichus was not the fact that he knew the whole Torah backwards and forwards on the tips of his fingers. His yichus was Musye sein Tochter. It's a very interesting spin on the Rebbe's marriage, but it really, really describes the Rebbe. The Rebbe's chassidishkeit, the Rebbe's hiskashus, the Rebbe's connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe was extreme. It was radical. The Rebbe was so connected to his Rebbe. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's difficult to know when it started. It's difficult to know how long it took to develop. It's hard to understand whether it got deeper over time. But the Rebbe, our Rebbe, who in his own right was a Gadol Shabbat and Benon Shakadei Sheyalyin, and he came from the Tzemach Tzedek, and all the other things that Rebbe was in his own right, to him, the most important thing in the world was the Rebbe the Shver, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he cherished, I'm sure the Rebbe, how do we say it in American, had a good relationship. But the Rebbe was a Rebbe, was a tzaddik and a chassid, and to him the greatest thing that the Rebbetzin gave him was connection to the Rebbe Shver. That's how he saw it. That's how the Rebbe felt about it. And that's how the Rebbe lived his whole life. He's an Edom. He's a son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It brings him closer to the Rebbe. And to him there was nothing greater in the world, which is an interesting thing. It's mamish, an interesting thing to consider. That hiskashus, the kind of bonding the Rebbe had with the Frierdiker Rebbe because he was married to the Rebbe. One of the stories I told the men last night, which is a mamish, a disturbing story. When the Rebbe Chaim Mushka passed away, the Rebbe called in a Rav and asked him if he's still a son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe called in a Rav after they lived together for 59 years. It's a pretty good run. It's a pretty good run, right? I know people who Baruch Hashem married more than 60 years. But the Rebbetzin got married when they were older. They were in their late 20s. The Rebbetzin passed away in Tafshin Memches. They were married for 59 years, almost 60 years. And the Rebbe called in a Rav, and the Rebbe was already a Rebbe by then, almost 40 years. And the Rebbe calls in a Rav and asks the Rav, is he still a son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe? Now what difference does it make? Now that Rav had two problems. Problem number one, he knew that the answer to the question has to be yes. And he is an Edom. Problem number 2 is he has to prove it in halacha, and the Rebbe's not taking no garbage. He's going to have to qualify it in halacha that the marriage is forever. When the Rebbe was sitting Shiva, the Rebbe kept on saying that a marriage is a binyan adiyad. The person loses his wife, they're still married. Binyan adiyad, they're married forever. Binyan adiyad, binyan adiyad. Someone actually came to the Rebbe and started talking to the Rebbe about what it means to lose a wife, and the Rebbe said to him, I just told you it's a binyan adiyad, we're still married. So you can ask all the kashas you want, about second marriage and all these things. But that was the Rebbe's rhetoric during the Shiva. Binyan adiyad. You're married, you're always married. And one of the most important parts of this binyan adiyad itself, as far as the Rebbe was concerned, was that he's connected to Rebbe Namishver. This was the Rebbe's connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's why this wedding was to the Rebbe so very important. I mean, to the Frierdiker Rebbe was also very important. And to us, huh? How important is that chasana? We have no idea how important the chasana is. Yeah? But this is the story. I think, to me personally, when I think of Dal Kislev, this is what I feel. That from the Rebbe's point of view, it connects his bond to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that's it. There's a crazy story, which is not printed in a book. It really is a crazy story, and it's really written in a book. That when the Frierdiker passed away, the Rebbe refused to be a Rebbe, as you know. When the Frierdiker Rebbe refused to be a Rebbe. And from everything we know about the Rebbe, he meant it. The Rebbe didn't say no until you ask again. It was like, when you ask me 100 times, I'll say yes, but the Vailam say, he wasn't playing around. When the Rebbe said no, was no. And the Chassidim changed the Rebbe's mind. I mean, that's how I understand the story of Yud Shvat. Chassidim changed the Rebbe's mind. Chassidim changed the Rebbe's mind. It's the only time, probably in history, the Rebbe said no, and the Chassidim insisted, and the Rebbe said, okay, he changed his mind, he agreed to be a Rebbe. I think that's a valid version of the story. There was a Yid in 770 who went over to the Rebbe and said, I don't understand you. I was in the Frierdiker Rebbe's house in 1922, 28 years before, when the Rebbe's mother came to the Frierdiker Rebbe to negotiate the shidduch between the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. And at that meeting, the Frierdiker Rebbe agreed that the Rebbe is going to be the next Rebbe. Did you know that? Some people get very nervous when I tell this. I don't know why, but they get very nervous. But before the Rebbe met the Rebbe Tzachaya Mushka, there was an arrangement made between the Rebbe's parents and the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rebbe is going to be the next Rebbe. So the Zalman Gerari says to the Rebbe, what do you mean you don't want to be a Rebbe? It was negotiated before your chasana. Before you dated the Rebbe, and before you became engaged to the Rebbe, it was determined that you're going to be the next Rebbe. Why are you refusing the job? You know what the Rebbe answered? The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't tell me. My mother told me, my father told me, the Tzemach Tzedek told me, the Alter Rebbe told me, the Baal Shem Tov told me, the Eibishter told me, everybody told me. The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't tell me. That's what he answered. He didn't say it wasn't true. He says, I have one boss. And it's the Rebbe Deshver. The Rebbe would say, the Rebbe Deshver Nesidereinu. I didn't hear it from the Rebbe, my father-in-law, they would always say, Rebbe Deshver Nesidereinu. Listen to the tapes over and over. He said it thousands of times. He says, I didn't hear from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and nothing to talk about. So you know what the end of that story was? A group of Chassidim on Lag BaOmer went to the oil with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and they told the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rebbe keeps on saying that he was never told by the Frierdiker Rebbe. So that day, the Rebbe also went to the oil. He came back from the oil. He didn't say a word, but he never said that excuse again. That excuse, you know the stories, but that excuse the Frierdiker Rebbe did not tell me the Rebbe stopped saying. If verstehst, that excuse which is anyway. This is when we think about our hiskashus. I mean, we're different generations. I appreciate that. Hiskashus for you is different than for me, and in many ways it's easier, but it's very hard. In other words, hiskashus is not a game. Hiskashus is not carrying a flag. Hiskashus is a dedication. Hiskashus means my life is lived in the spirit of the Rebbe. I serve the Rebbe. Hiskashus is very earnest. Hiskashus is a very grown-up thing. It's a very deep idea to be connected to a Rebbe Tzaddik with the belief, like it says in the Tanya, that my connection to the Rebbe connects me to the Eibishter. That's what Chassidus is really about. Your connection to the Rebbe is not for brachas and for the fuah shleimus and for better parnasa and all those other wonderful things which we all take from the Rebbe. Like you go to, my friend always laughs, you're going to the oils, like going to an ATM machine, you plug in your card, you pull out some cash and you go right there. The Rebbe gives brachas. That's not the relationship. That's just the dividend, and non-Lubavitchers get that also. Lahav Goyim get that also. Hiskashus means my connection to Hashem is through the Rebbe, and the translation of that relationship is service, is action. I tell the girls, this comes up in a lot of discussions. We talk about hiskashus, and one of the things that I think is very, very true, You're not born a makusher. You become a makusher of a life. I mean, when you're little, it's very easy to be a chassid. When you become a teenager, it becomes very hard to be a chassid. It becomes very hard to be a chassid, number one, because you're questioning everything. You want to understand. And number two, the nature of being a young adult, forgive me for my candor, is the kind of depth that this relationship requires takes growing up. You learn in life. You will learn about yourself. The word das, you learn in Tanya das. Every day you get older, you have more das. Das is not smart. No, das is connection. Das is depth. His kashrus is about das. And when you're 17 and 18, you got the energy of a lion. You have the energy of a lion, the will of a lion, the brain of a lion. But das is something that develops over time. So his kashrus, it takes a lifetime. In other words, if you feel like you're not that connected to the Rebbe, tomorrow you'll be more connected. The next day you'll be more connected. And ultimately that connection is, this is a radical statement, but this is basic to Chassidus. My relationship with the Eibishter is based on my relationship with the Rebbe, not chas v'shalom that I have two gods. But my connection to Atzm, the Rebbe, is like a see-through glass. It's called Mamutza HaMachaber. In no way does the Rebbe stand in between. The relationship we have with the Eibishter is based on the relationship we have with the Rebbe, and that means that the relationship is very, very important and very, very deep, and ultimately it comes down to service, action, right? We're Chassidim, how? If you could feel your Yechidish HaBenefesh, and you could feel how your Yechidish HaBenefesh is connected to the Rebbe's Yechidish HaBenefesh, and you could feel how the Rebbe's Yechidish HaBenefesh is one where Atzma, so Baruch Hu, that's real chassid, right? But I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, it's not going to happen to anybody in this room. That's the Madrega of Rabbi Michal Apotzke, the Alter Rebbe's greatest chassidim. We do his kashrus on our level, and it ultimately comes down to service. But it's a serious thing. It's a real thing. And the Rebbe himself is a chassid, just like you're a chassid, the Rebbe a chassid, he's a chassid. The difference is only we're his chassidim, he's the chassid of his Rebbe, the Rebbe the Shver. And that's how he saw the wedding. The Rebbe saw the wedding as the occasion when he became connected to the Rebbe the Shver of Siderenu, and this was his Rebbe. And this whole world, the Rebbe's entire world revolved around the Frierdiker Rebbe. There's so many stories to support this. When the Rebbe fabrengt, our Rebbe fabrengt a lot. When the Rebbe fabrengt, every time you mention the Frierdiker Rebbe, I'm talking when the Frierdiker Rebbe was still alive, he would choke up. In other words, it was so important to him. That bond with the Frierdiker Rebbe was so, the connection that he had with the Frierdiker Rebbe was his whole world, was his whole life. And that's how the Rebbe saw his marriage. We saw his marriage in many other ways, but I feel that that's how the Rebbe saw this marriage. So let me tell you another story, okay? I made my point. We probably could fabreng more about this, but I'll leave this all. I'll tell you another story. The Rebbe's wedding was a grand affair. It was absolutely beautiful and lavish, and it was very expensive. And Frierdiker Rebbe had no money. Frierdiker didn't have 10 cents. It's a true story. There was a Yid in Eretz Yisrael, a very big chassid, very big makush. There was a V'lam Parish, and he was walking, and this is 1929. You know what Israel looked like in 1928? It was ramshackle. It was a very primitive country. But they had the old British trains, And he was walking along a train line, and he found the bag. The bag was full of gold. It was worth, by today's standards, hundreds of thousands of dollars. An enormous amount of money. Oitzer, mamash oitzer. He didn't go home and tell his wife and his kids. He went to the bank. He cashed out the gold coins for currency, whatever the currency was. In Israel at that time, they were using the British pound. And sent every penny to the Frierdiker Rebbe. He didn't keep a dime for himself. He was a poor man in Rabbanish. And people later told him, you're an idiot. You could have kept a little for yourself. And he had an answer about that. When you're an idiot, you're closer to God. When you're too smart, you have a little bit of an uppercase. He had a good answer. But he sent the entire sum to Frierdiker Rebbe. That money made the Rebbe's chasna. Imagine this was that money. The Rebbe's chasna was very expensive. There's actually a letter from Chachu. He writes to somebody, chasna daf mishtelen, we have to make a wedding, but we can't afford it. Now the Frierdiker Rebbe made 3 weddings. The first wedding was so impoverished. When the Rebbe made the Rasha got married, when the Chanagar got married, there was so little money in the house, they couldn't afford vodka. Can you imagine in Russia not being able to afford vodka? It's like in America not being able to afford air. They couldn't afford vodka. The Frierdiker Rebbe served lemonade to l'chaim at Rashag's wedding. And the only reason lemonade because there was a chassid who had a lemonade business. In other words, he stood on a street corner, so where the little kid sold lemonade. There was a married man with children who sold lemonade. That's how he supported his family. From the limonade, that was the l'chaim. That's how poor the Friedrich Rebbe was. The Rebbe's chasana was a grand affair. It took several days. The Friedrich Rebbe fed a lot of people, and he invited so many people. And the l'chaim describes the Kala room by the Kabbalah's Panim. It was trees. They bought Pasha. They took, I don't know how you do this. The florists brought in trees. They made the room look like a garden. The room where the women were, with the Kabbalah's Panim, was so beautiful. It looked like a garden, and in the middle was sitting the Rebbetzin. He describes it. He describes how the Rebbetzin looked. He was an old man. A man is not like, oh, look at women. He was an alter. He didn't have machshavas. But he went into the Kala side, and he described how it was gorgeous. It costed money. And if you got to pay the bills. The chasana was very, very grand, very, very lavish. It was a great Beita chasana. And it went on all night. Mamish till the morning. And late in the night, after Shabbat Brachas, the Friedrich Rebbe said, Nacham ala Maimed, could you wait a few minutes? But the story that the Rebbe told by FABRENGEN was, we got 7 minutes. That at one point in the middle of the chasana, the Friedrich Rebbe got up. He put a towel over his arm like a waiter. He took a tray. He filled it with shot glasses. He was holding a bottle of mashki. He filled up all the glasses. And he went from table to table, saying l'chaim to all the guests. They were the Friedrich Rebbe made a wedding. He invited people. Most of the people at the wedding were his chassidim, his talmidim. And the Rebbe was walking around. I would imagine if the Rebbe walked around, nobody sat. But officially, everyone was sitting at their table. And the Rebbe went to you, and he gave you l'chaim, and he gave brachas. He went from table to table. Along the bunch of Yechon and Gordon Oliver Shalom was at the wedding. He says the Friedrich Rebbe was so happy he was walking on water. He was mamish flying. The Friedrich Rebbe was in such an elated mood. He was so ufgeleit by this chassan he can't even imagine. And when the Rebbe's in a good mood, the brachas are showered like rain. The Rebbe gave brachas and brachas and brachas, and there's so many wonderful things from table to table to table. Anyway, at the end of the room with the Bachrim, there was a small yeshiva in Vasha, and the Bachrim were invited to the wedding, and they were there. The Rebbe went over to them, and the Rebbe said, I'm not going to give you mashke individually, I'm going to give the mashke to your mashpia, and the mashke is going to give the mashpia to you, and he spoke a little sichem. But so the Rebbe said, I was sitting at the head table, and suddenly the Rebbe the Shver gets up. So I said, how can I sit if the Rebbe the Shver is standing? So I got up to help him. I was going to hold the bottle, I'll hold the extra glasses. He wanted to help the Friedrich Rebbe make this tour of the wedding hall. It was a lot of people. And so the Rebbe said, the Rebbe the Shver hat auf mir a kugetan. The Rebbe took a look at me and said, you sit right in your seat, you chassan. And the Rebbe said, so I'm sitting, and the Friedrich was walking around. He said, it was very hard for me to sit when the Rebbe was walking around until the Friedrich Rebbe came and sat back down and was mamshel the Sudas Chassan. And the Rebbe said, it was hard for me to sit while the Friedrich Rebbe was walking around. But during that tour of the hall, at some point, the Friedrich Rebbe said loud, as biti nosati leish. You know, you're going to get married, yeah? I'm sure your husband's going to be a very nice guy. But he probably won't be a Rebbe, yeah? As biti nosati leish, I gave my daughter to an ish. He was very proud. Every girl gets married to an ish, right? But this is not the Zelba ish. As biti nosati leish. So the Rebbe's father, who was not at the wedding, heard about this. Somebody sent the Rebbe's father a note and told him that the Friedrich Rebbe said by the chassan loud in front of everybody, as biti nosati leish. So the Rebbe's father writes to his son, to the Rebbe. He said, I got word that the Friedrich Rebbe said at the chassan, as biti nosati leish. I'm assuming he had some other nice things to say about you. I need to know every single compliment he gave you. I want to hear every word. He says, I know you're full of anivis, but I'm your father, and I'm entitled to know. I want you to tell me, I promise you that Rebbe didn't send it to him. You have to tell me every nice word the Friedrich Rebbe said about you. I need to hear it from you. I wanted you to tell me what happened. And I don't know whether the Rebbe did or didn't answer that letter. I'm going to guess he didn't. But the Rebbe's father says, I'm entitled to know. Ich make wissen all the nice things he said about you. So I'll just tell you one other thing, and then I'll let you ask your question. Before the chuppah, the chassan went to a room to prepare himself for the chuppah. You put on a kittel, you put on a gatl, it's a whole seder. So a group of people went in with the Friedrich Rebbe, and the Friedrich Rebbe told them all to go out, and only 2 people were witnesses for this. The Friedrich Rebbe's shred, Friedrich Rebbe's father, Rebbe Nachamedin's parents were at the wedding. Rebbe Avram Kishenov, Avram Shneers and Kishenov were at that wedding. And Rebbe Chaim Altos, Rebbe Chaim, I think, was there. And the Rebbe took a gattel, Friedrich Rebbe took a gattel, and he said to the Rebbe, I should really make a bracha, every day make a bracha, Oizer Yisrael B'Gvura. Oizer Yisrael B'Gvura is a girdle for a gattel. I should really make, and of course the key word in that phrase, Oizer Yisrael, is Gvura, right? The gattel gives Gvura. Chagra ba'oiz masneh, Gvura. You have in Tanya, the first thing you get is a Kodesh, the meaning of a gattel. He says, I should really make a bracha. He says, but I already made the bracha in the morning. And I think the pshat is, and when I made the bracha in the morning, I had this in mind. And he said to the Rebbe, mit dem bin dich zu mir mich zu dir b'zeu b'vo. With this piece of string, with this gattel, I am tying you to me and me to you, in this world and in the next world. So that's another story from the Chasana. Okay, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so appropriate, but
Maybe.
was there jealousy that the Rebbe's wedding was so big and the wedding was so small?
I cannot get into people's heads. You have to understand there was a third Chasana. 3 years later, third Chasana in Landerov. It wasn't as poor as the one in Russia, but it wasn't the same thing. The Rebbe's Chasana was special. The Rebbe had 3 daughters. The Friedrich Rebbe had 3 daughters. The younger daughter was very close to Chaya Mushka. She was the older daughter was, you started up not a pleasant conversation. I wasn't there, I don't know. How about that for an answer?